Three Dragons Media presents the Ridgeton Tales.
Chapter 11. One Final Task. Keldos Half-Elf Cleric. "Let them come," Magnar said. His face became hard. A smattering of blood painted his cheek. Keldos kept a determined gaze on the silhouetted tower beyond the cavern's maw. The silvery light of the moon made it seem so peaceful out in the quarry, but he knew better. It would soon become chaos. "We need to take this fight to them," Telerik said, eyes still glued to the tower. "Hit them before they can regroup." "Aye," Magnus agreed. "Fire and steel. We'll catch them off guard." The quarry was open. Too open. Keldos didn't much like the thought of sprinting toward an occupied tower. How do we get there before being riddled with arrows?
Good question.
Magnus sighed and folded his arms, rubbing his rough beard. The recent fighting and traveling had left his once neat hair unkempt and untrimmed. Come to think of it, Keldos realized his hair was getting long too. He ran a hand through the dark locks of hair, snagging on tangles. Then he felt his jaw and chin. Thick hair rustled between his fingers. I've never let it grow this long before. It feels strange.
Keldos.
He looked up, hand still on his face. Beltayne stood in front of him, staring with a look that was no less than confused.
Is that hair on your face?
The snow elf slowly tried to touch Keldos' face before being swatted away. "Yes, Beltayne," Keldos began. "We've been over this before. I am half-elven. Human being the other. Therefore I can grow facial hair as well. Were you not paying attention the entire ride with the traveler?" Beltayne looked appalled, his eyes casting disappointment over Keldos.
Stunted ears and now facial hair. Abomination. Just frightful.
Keldos closed his eyes and took a deep, long breath. He turned, opened his eyes, and found Magnus, Telerik, and Magnar watching him.
I believe that one is incapable of being serious,
Magnus said, gesturing at Beltayne, who continued to be dismayed by Keldos' appearance. "No, he's serious, and that's the terrifying thing," Keldos said. "Now, what are we going to do about our tower problem?"
Fog.
Magnus raised a hand, and wispy, swirling fog formed above his palm. "We'll use the wizard's fog as cover to move close," Telerik explained, then pointed at his cousin leaning against the cavern wall, arms folded. Keldos had never seen her scowl before. "Val is going to assume the form of a rat and sneak inside." Val grumbled under her breath, staring contemptibly at the rest of them. Keldos thought back to the first time she'd morphed into the frightening obsidian panther. Powerful, majestic, and graceful all at once. She seemed so inept and aloof, but the pure grace and lethality of her cat form was magnificent to behold. Telerik detailed the rest of the plan. It wasn't a great plan, but it was going to have to work. Magnus stood near the cavern opening, pressed tightly against the jagged rock wall, peering out into the spacious quarry beyond. Sounds of clanking and voices hollering echoed from the dark tower. Candlelight flickered from the many windows overlooking the open space. Magnar grunted from the back of the group. "I still think charging the damn thing would have been better. They'd have shit themselves."
Not everyone is as stout as you, brother,
whispered Magnus. The wizard began weaving his hands in a motion as fluid as water. A gray mist formed gradually, filling the space between his thick fingers. Soon the entire cave was filled with the swirling, cold fog. Keldos felt a wetness in the air, caressing his face. It felt lovely, refreshing. Then the mist was moving. Magnus wafted his hands toward the quarry, willing his creation into the wild. The gray cloud slowly filtered out of the cave, potentially looking that of an eerie natural phenomenon to anyone watching from the tower. It was a perfect way to obfuscate Val and the rest of the group. "Now, Val." Telerik nudged his cousin, prodding her to get going. "Fine, but just so you know, I hate this." Val sneered at her cousin and wreathed her hands together. She began to change, her body twisting and churning. She shrank and shrank and shrank, until nothing but a common gray rat remained. The creature sat on its haunches, looking up at the rest of them. She was smaller than Telleric's boot. I get why she would hate it. Those creatures aren't exactly enviable, Keldos thought to himself with an eyebrow raised at the tiny thing. The rat looked up at the rest of them, hissed and ran out into the misty quarry. "She'll be fine," Telleric said, grinning. "Let's go." Keldos, Magnar, and Beltayne followed Telleric as he crept through Magnus's fog cloud. The wizard himself was on their heels, still weaving his hands, spewing mist. Keldos held his shield up above his head, protecting himself and the others behind. He expected a barrage of arrows, but they were met with nothing but calm and quiet. When they reached the stone foundation of the guard tower, they followed the wall until they reached a large, looming door. It was already open, and Keldos followed Telleric into the dark opening. Keldos burst into the building, mace raised high above his head, but only more silence and a dimly lit room greeted him. Val stood a few feet away beside the door. "No one is here. Once I snuck in, I did a quick once-over of this floor, and found no one." She was right. The room was left in disarray. Weapons and armor lay strewn about, and several small tables were flipped on their sides.
"What happened here?"
asked Magnus, finally stepping through the entryway. He relaxed his hands, and the mist began dissipating. Magnar grunted and walked around the place, kicking a piece of armor here and a weapon there. "Looks as if they fled. But why?" asked Telleric, his blade still drawn and at the ready. He wasn't going to be caught unaware. He moved quietly around the room, inspecting each chair, table, plate, and anything else he could. Keldos carefully stepped to the middle of the room, turning about. Black banners hauntingly hung down the windowless walls of the stony keep, and makeshift cots lined the back wall, each topped with dark-colored blankets that Keldos presumed to have been white at one point. Magnar moved to the base of a stone staircase, maul hefted over his shoulder. He grunted and sniffed the air, then knelt and placed his hand firmly on the damp stone. A loud clamoring split the air, echoing down the spiraling staircase. Voices, shouting. Magnar roared and bounded up the stairs and out of sight.
"Brother, wait."
Magnus shoved his hand into his satchel as he ran after his brother. The rest of the group followed close behind. Keldos's heart slammed against his chest, over and over. Keldos was last up the stairs, coming to another large room with stone pillars, as thick as centuries-old trees spaced evenly about. Moonlight shimmered in through an open double door at the front of the room, blanketing a huddle of figures, which casted monstrous shadows across the stone-worked floor. "Leave none alive!" A female voice tore through the stone halls of the tower. One of the figures mounted a beast and tore off into the night. 3 of the silhouettes stepped into the room, the door slamming shut behind them. Weapons in hand, the 3 humanoids neared, snarling and growling. A dark iron chandelier hanging from above cast a faint glow, illuminating the creatures. Thick, wiry black hair carpeted their arms, legs, and faces. Gangly limbs, rippled with lean muscle, bulging necks squeezed tightly by leather armor, and nasty, mottled hair poked out from the unfastened jerkin piece with their boulders for legs showing through ripped trousers. Keldos knew the creatures all too well. Bugbears. The creatures' weapons were jagged, curved pieces of metal resembling the shape of a sword. Goblin weapons by Keldos's eye. One bore a morning star that looked in better condition, and he hefted it back and forth in front of him like some kind of mocking dance. "The mistress wants you dead," the one with the morning star barked. The 2 other bugbears each wielded damage-notched swords and had taken stances, ready for the impending melee. "That had to be Rythella," Telleric growled, ripping an arrow from his quiver. "We need to end this quickly." "Stand back, Tell." Magnar stepped forward, humongous maul in hand, laughing at the danger before them. 3 bugbears ain't gonna stop me." Beltayne appeared beside Keldos, Winter's bite in his hand, face rigid with determinate resolve.
I shall duel one of these foes. It will prepare me for my great climactic duel with Highward and Blacktide.
He held his blade outstretched, pointing it at the rightmost bugbear.
You there. Prepare yourself.
The hairy creature flung itself at the snow elf, growling as he swung wildly. The second sword-wielding bugbear charged at Magnar, matching the energy of his comrade, flailing his rusted sword in every direction, as Magnar brushed off each attack with ease, laughing all the while. Beltayne flew into a flashy display, parrying each stroke with ease, making fine cuts, gashing the hairy flesh of the bugbear. An agonizing scream split the air with each cut, but the creature pressed on as if possessed. Magnar ended his fight quickly, catching an overhead attack with his maul. He twisted his weapon violently, wrenching the sword free of the bugbear's grasp. The barbarian roared and heel kicked him in the gut, doubling over the bugbear, gasping for air. Magnar heaved his weapon in an upward arc, catching the creature on its chin. Bone crunched and blood sprayed as the bugbear's head snapped backward. The pommel of the barbarian's weapon slammed into its foe's chest, launching him backward out of the melee. Beltayne took to the offensive, spinning and cutting at the bugbear. The poor thing hadn't the slightest clue how to fight, yet somehow managed to block the first 3 hacks from Winter's bite, but the 4th proved true. The frozen blade skewered through a thigh, then hacked at the bugbear's sword hand, nearly severing it at the wrist. Beltayne finished the beast off with a well-placed torso strike. As if concluding a tragic play, Beltayne let the bugbear down easily, then whispered to it as he knelt beside it.
Well fought, strange creature. Well fought.
The 3rd bugbear roared and attacked. He swung furiously, albeit with more control than his counterparts, nearly connecting with the barbarian a few times. 2 arrows plunged into the chest of the bugbear, staggering him. He looked down at the fletching, grabbing at them desperately as a 3rd arrow punched through his skull. He fell to his knees, crumpling in a heap. The Morning Star clanged to the ground. "We don't have time for this," Telerik said, stowing his bow. "Let's go." Keldos walked over to the bugbear Beltayne felled, and noticed something strange. The creature began to slowly shrink. Its hair started to fade, revealing pale skin beneath. The face contorted into that of a human man, his lifeless eyes staring up at the heavens. "By the peace of Siak," Keldos breathed. He knelt beside the man and rested a hand on their chest. What twisted magic begot this man?
There's only one thing that could do this,
Magnus said, standing over Keldos.
Necromancy.
"Necromancy!" Keldos gasped. He jerked his hand back from the dead man and stood quickly.
One thing's for sure.
Magnus began, scanning the room.
This place feels corrupted. The magic in the air is volatile.
Telerik had opened the main doors. He and Val stood in the moonlight, peering out into the darkness. No sign of her. Hells. He stalked back into the room, stowing his bow. "Let's at least search the place. Maybe we'll find some damning evidence." He and Val scurried into the shadowed areas of the keep, tossing things left and right. "There's somebody here," Magnar called out from a corner of the room. Keldos and the others ran over to find a mound of corpses garbed in the ratty, torn linens of slaves. One, a woman with yellow hair that would have once been as vibrant as the sun, was clinging to life, clutching at her bleeding stomach. "Please, help," she croaked, spitting up blood. Keldos knelt beside her and took her hand, cold. She was so cold. "The Miss Donna Dietrich," she sputtered and went limp. Her hand slipped out of Keldos. "Siak, take this woman into your charge and see her into the afterlife," Keldos said, closing the woman's eyes as he rested her flat on the ground. "May she be at peace." He clasped his hands together and closed his eyes. Wisdom is strength, and strength is wisdom.
By the arcane.
Magnus tugged at his beard.
What is Mistana?
Asked Beltayne.
Is that a god? It sounds godly.
Magnar snorted and began to walk away. He spoke over his shoulder. "No, 'tis a damned place. Things that go there typically don't come back."
Good. Then it looks like we do not need to venture there,
Beltayne said, finally sheathing Winter's bite, and followed after Magnar. Mistana detritus, thought Keldos. Why in the gods would this woman have mentioned that dark, ruined place? His eyes lingered on the woman for a while longer. Her face had relaxed. No more pain. She would move on and find serenity, just as Siak promised. Seeing the light fade from someone's eyes was never easy, no matter the circumstances. But it comforted Keldos to know that she was in a much better place than this.
The corruption is fading.
Magnus stood nearby with eyes closed and arms raised. He took a deep breath.
It must have been what twisted these men into bugbears.
The wizard relaxed, then moved to the doorway.
Come, Keldos. The wood elves have finished their search.
Keldos stood and followed the rest of the company out into the silver moonlight so they could begin their journey back to Praldosta. Relief washed over Keldos as they walked through Praldosta's town gate. The 2 guards posted were barely awake, nodding sleepily at the 6 travelers. Clouds had moved in, cutting out the moonlight, as if a fire snuffed out. Torchlight provided enough light for them to navigate through the streets. After a few minutes, the group came to the same tavern they'd visited yesterday, the Jabbering Kitten, and procured a couple rooms and retired for the evening. The day had been long and weary. Their bodies had taken a beating from several battles, and a nice comfy bed would do the trick. Hopefully. Keldos reached his room, that he, unfortunately, had to share with Beltayne. The snow elf had stripped to his underlinens and sat on the edge of his bed, whispering to Winter's Bite. "How much longer are you going to be up speaking to that thing?" Keldos had laid down on his bed after quickly shedding his armor, exhaustion truly setting in. Beltayne leaned the sword against the wall near the windowsill, in arm's reach of his bed, and laid down.
"I am fine now. Do not worry your bearded face."
Keldos closed his eyes and grinned. "Good night, Sir Beltayne."
"Good night, priest Small Ears."
The next morning, the group roused sluggishly, taking their time to freshen up and get ready for another day's worth of travel. Keldos was eager to return to Highward and Blacktide, in hopes he had learned something of his father and the paladins. First, they needed to meet with the burgomaster of the quarry, before departing for Ridgeton. Keldos and Beltayne met the others just outside the Jabbering Kitten. It was about midday now. The gang had slept for a few hours, just enough to make you feel more tired than you were before you fell asleep. But they didn't have the luxury of sleeping the day away. "Let's inform the burgomaster what happened at his mine and leave this place behind," Telerik hissed, pulling his hood over his face. He sure did love to keep his face shadowed. "I do wish we had some evidence in hand to expose Rythella, but we'll just have to go off of the word of the slaves themselves." The town was bustling. Chatter carried in the breeze as people weaved through the dusty, rock-filled streets. All manner of beings walked the roads, from humans to elves and dwarves. Even halflings darted around the crowd at waist level of a normal height person. "Where do we find him?" asked Magnar. Annoyance spilled from his lips with ease. "Probably the same damned place we spoke with him the other night," replied Telerik. It didn't take much time for them to find Burgomaster Noster, and however, as the tall, slender man, though his gut protruded much farther than it had any right to, walked briskly toward them from the official's building. "Excuse me, gentlemen. And lady," he called out to them as he approached. "What on Eridan did you do at the mine? I have been getting complaints all morning about some sort of slaughter." Keldos watched as Telerik and Magnus explained the entire situation to the mayor, who for some reason insisted on being called Burgomaster. It was strange, but Highward and Blacktide vouched for the man, so Keldos didn't question his methods. Magnus made sure they left out the strange encounter with the cultists and the eerie obelisk. Their main concern was sharing the information that they'd put a stop to a deplorable slaving operation happening right under his nose. "Well, I thank you all for that," Noster said, scratching his belly. "I must say, I had no idea something like that would ever transpire under my leadership. Bah! I should have expected it, though. This place was a cesspool when I got here. Do you know how hard it is to turn a place like this into a respectable establishment?" "I imagine it's pretty difficult," Keldos added, trying to make the man feel better. "This place is still a cesspool," Magnar said. He glanced around at the people walking past them, though the people seemed to be a lot better than most places in the Tameless Shore. The burgomaster feigned a smile at that. "I will make this place great, dwarf. I do not intend on being the mayor of this backwater shithole forever. Now give my regards to the Highwarden if you see him there in Ridgeton. He and I go way back. Good man, that one. He helped me get to where I am today." He thanked them once more, and disappeared into the stream of people flowing through the street. Keldos and the others made their way back to the stables, near the front gates of Praldosta. A large wooden structure stood just inside the gates, manned by a few stable hands. When they finally reached the stables, they noticed a cluster of people inside, talking amongst themselves. "How much you want for that one?" a voice asked. "I'll take no less than 50 gold pieces," a second voice replied. "Rubbish! 40 gold!" a third shouted. 45, the second called out. 42, 40, 5, 43. Keldos edged closer and saw a chunk of a man holding the reins of a horse in a stall. His tunic was a dark brown, and stained with something even darker, and he bore a patchy mustache. 4 younger men stood facing him, shouting amongst themselves.
What's going on here?
Asked Magnus, his voice carrying across the stable. It suddenly hit Keldos that the man was holding the reins to one of their horses, specifically, the horse Magnar had ridden. "If you want to join in on the auction, then come closer," said the fat man. "I'm taking offers on this fine mare. One of my best, I must say." Keldos winced at the words. "Oh, hells. This isn't going to end well." "One of your best?" Magnar said. The dwarf stepped forward, fists clenched, forearms like a taut rope. "Well, stammered the big man. "Yes, it is. 'Tis funny because that's my horse." The man gawped at the barbarian, eyes wide. His eyes darted from Magnar to Keldos and the others. He tugged at his collar before speaking. "Not possible. I've had this beast for years." "Years?" asked one of the prospective buyers. "Jeff, you said you found these horses not but a couple days ago." Telerik had enough, and was already fidgeting with the reins of his horse in the stall nearest the exit. "You there, don't touch my horse," shouted the heavy Jeff. "Piss off, fat man. We're taking back our horses, and there's nothing you can do about it." Telerik ushered his steed from the stable. "Let's go, you lot. We don't have time for this," he hissed back over his shoulder. Keldos wasted no time, hurrying to his mount and getting her saddle in order. Thankfully, Telerik made a quick decision. Who knows what would have happened? "Topper, Dietrich, stop them." Hells. 2 men as big as mountains lumbered from around the side of the stables as Keldos and the others reached the doors. Each had a soul dagger at their hip, but that was all Keldos could see, as far as weapons. He gathered these men didn't need much more than that to handle their problems. They looked to be twins, both wearing leather vests that left their bulging arms free to intimidate. Scars pockmarked their arms, and their crooked grins full of gaps where teeth should have been.
Get out of our way, lads.
Magnus said, his hand safe inside his satchel.
We don't want to go spilling any blood over a few horses.
"Huh, is yous that gonna get hurt?" The brutish man's voice carried into the stables, rattling the very rafters. He had an accent, but Keldos could tell it wasn't from any particular region, but more of an intelligence affliction. Magnar marched his horse out of the stables, leaving Jeff behind on his arse, pointing at the barbarian. "Stop them." Magnar moved so fast he seemed a blur. 1 second he was beside Keldos. The next he was grappling with one of the giant men, squeezing tightly around his neck. They toppled to the ground, but Magnar held firm, putting the man unconscious in mere seconds. The other man moved to intervene, but Keldos acted, reaching an arm toward the brute, penetrating his mind. "Halt!" The word reverberated from Keldos like nothing he'd ever experienced before. He didn't know why he did it, only that he knew he could. The massive mountain of a man stopped dead in his tracks. He went rigid as a wooden plank, but his eyes darted around, terrified. He grunted and groaned, trying his hardest to move.
"By the blessed Icy Queen herself,"
Beltayne said, clapping Keldos on the shoulder.
"That was magnificent, Small Ears."
When did you learn that?
Asked Magnus. He looked proudly at Keldos. The wizard loved magic and was clearly excited he witnessed a new sort of power. "I am not sure," Keldos said, looking down at his hands. "Siak has granted me new powers, but it would seem I do not yet know their limits, or their potential."
Not to worry, Kel.
Magnus threw an arm around Keldos' shoulder.
I can help you learn what sort of magic your god of peace has given to you.
Keldos looked at Magnus and gave a faint smile. "I thank you." "Well then," Telerik said. He was sitting atop his horse, Val beside him on hers. "Now that we've handled this waste of time, can we get moving on?" Keldos and the others mounted up and made their saddles as comfortable as they were going to get. Riding a horse was never cozy, but the more padding, the better. Or at least Keldos assumed. The company set out, leaving the mining town of Praldosta and the carnage at the mines behind them. Keldos was eager to return to Ridgeton and speak with the High Warden. He was hopeful that the leader of the Trident Guard had learned something of his father. Keldos needed him to have learned something. With every passing day, Keldos became less and less hopeful that his father yet lived. "No, you cannot think like that. Father is alive, and you will find him."
Now tell me of this new magic, Keldos. We have a long journey ahead, and my brain is like a dry crop, desperately needing to soak up the water that is knowledge,
said Magnus, pulling up beside him. And so, as they galloped on, the two of them discussed this new mind magic the peaceful Siak bestowed upon Keldos. It was pleasant. He needed to do anything to keep his mind from wandering, from racing back to the potential fate of his father and the heralds of Siak. End of chapter.
The Ridgeton Tales is a collaborative web serial written by D.M. Sanders, Ciaran Michael Sullivan, and Ian Oliver. All rights reserved. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents either are products of the author's imaginations or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual events, locales, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. For more information about the authors, including blogs, biographical material, and individual works, please visit our website at www.3dragonsmedia.com. A written transcript of this episode is also available for free on our website. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.